Paper Boy, The Disappearance of Johnny Gosch, 1982. John and Noreen Gosch were still sleeping when 12-year-old Johnny quietly crept out of their house in West Des Moines, Iowa, at 6 a.m. on September 5, 1982.
He was going out to deliver copies of the Sunday Des Moines Register to customers along his paper route. During the week, the junior high school student delivered the newspapers in the afternoon. On Sundays, he had to leave the house before dawn. His father usually accompanied him, but Johnny had complained the night before that he wanted to do the paper route by himself. His parents disagreed. The next morning, Johnny decided not to wake up his father. As he left the house, he grabbed his red wagon to carry the newspapers and Gretchen, the family's dachshund, for company. Then he walked down to the street corner where he and other newspaper carriers went to pick up their bundles.
Johnny was about to begin his delivery route when he was stopped by a stocky, middle-aged man with black hair, dark eyes, and a mustache. He was driving a blue, two-door Ford with Iowa license plates. He asked for directions, which the freckle-faced young paperboy provided. However, there was something about the man that made Johnny uncomfortable. The Ford circled again. Johnny decided to take his newspapers and head home. As he walked down the street, another boy heard Gretchen growl. A tall man that the boys had not noticed earlier was walking closely behind Johnny and trying to get his attention. Johnny turned a corner and disappeared. The boys heard a car door slam. Another boy in a nearby house woke up and looked out the window in time to see a blue car run through a stop sign and speed away. The phone rang at the Gosch's house just after 7 a.m. as Johnny's customers began calling. They had not received their newspapers and wanted to know why. His parents went to his bedroom, but there was no sign of their son and the family dog. Clearly, Johnny was out delivering his newspapers. His father John climbed into the car and drove off to help, but all he found was Johnny's red wagon still full of newspapers less than 2 blocks from their house. He returned home and broke the news to his wife. "Johnny's gone," he told her. Their dog returned home by herself shortly afterwards. John and Noreen Gosch realized that there was something terribly wrong. Johnny would not just wander off, so they called police at 8:30 a.m. to report him missing. While they waited for the officers to arrive, Noreen phoned other boys who picked up their newspapers at the same corner as Johnny. That is when she learned that her son had been last seen rounding a corner after talking to a strange man in a blue car. When the police arrived, the Gosches told them about the witnesses who had seen their son talking to a man just before his disappearance. They provided a description of the car and a partial license plate number, but the police said that they would not run a motor vehicle check for 72 hours. Despite the information, the officers treated the case as though Johnny was a runaway since he was older than age 10. They asked his parents if he was unhappy at home. His parents were frustrated by the police's approach to the situation. They knew that Johnny had not run away, and that he had been abducted by a stranger. The Gosches recruited their friends to help them find Johnny and launched their own search. Volunteers scoured the neighborhood, rivers, and a state park 5 miles away. There was no sign of Johnny, not even the newspaper bag that he carried for his deliveries. The Des Moines police did not begin a full-scale investigation until 3 days later. By then, the trail of the 2 men whom witnesses had seen talking to Johnny had grown cold. A police artist drew a composite sketch of the man that newspaper boys had seen driving the car. It was released to the media, but it did not generate any leads. His family distributed 10,000 posters with his picture on it to media outlets, police, coroners, gas stations, and bus stations around the country. The family was confident that Johnny was still alive. Every night, Noreen Gosch continued to leave her porch light on. She and her husband appeared on television shows and gave interviews in an effort to generate leads about their son's disappearance. A photograph of Johnny's face appeared on milk cartons belonging to the Iowa-based Anderson Erickson Dairy. About a month after the kidnapping, a telephone operator received a call from a young boy who said that he was Johnny Gosch from Des Moines, Iowa, and he was trying to reach his mother. The line went dead and the call was not completed, making it impossible to trace the location from which it originated. The family was unhappy with the police investigation. They hired a private detective with the Investigative Research Agency in Chicago a month after Johnny's disappearance. In the ensuing year, they would come to believe that their son's kidnappers had taken him south or southwest of Des Moines. This belief was fueled by what appeared to be sightings of Johnny throughout that area. In March 1983, 6 months after Johnny vanished, a boy who resembled him approached a woman as she was leaving a store in Oklahoma. "My name is John David Gosch," he reportedly said. "Please help me." Before she had a chance to react, 2 men came up to him and led him away. When she alerted police, they thought that it was just a father disciplining his son. It was not until October 1983 that she made the connection with Johnny Gosch, when she saw a photo of him while she was watching an NBC television movie about the case of Adam Walsh. Late that summer of 1983, a youth managed to edge up to some customers at a store in the West and said that he was Johnny Gosch, but a man quickly came and led him away. The family also said that they had received phone calls they believed were from Johnny. Noreen Gosch reported getting calls in April 1983 from a boy who cried "Mom, Mom," and said that he was hurt and trying to get away. The boy's voice sounded like her son's. The calls were made 5 to 10 minutes apart and lasted about 15 to 25 seconds each. In August 1983, his brother and sister were home when the telephone rang. They heard him on the other end pleading for help and asking to speak to his mother. Then someone slammed down the phone. Johnny's grieving parents were also the victims of hoaxes and extortion attempts. In August 1985, the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrested 19-year-old Robert Herman Meyer II of Saginaw, Michigan. He had contacted the Gosches and said that he could free their son from the clutches of a Mexican drug dealer if they gave him money. Police caught him at the Canadian border near Buffalo, New York, as he tried to flee into Canada. He was charged with fraud after bilking the Gosches of $11,000. By then, a second Des Moines, Iowa, paperboy had disappeared. On August 12, 1984, 13-year-old Eugene Martin left home to deliver copies of the Des Moines Register and vanished without a trace. Within days, 18 of the Des Moines Register's 1,900 carriers in the metropolitan area quit. The paper announced that if carriers requested it, they would deliver bundles of newspapers to their homes instead of dropping them off at more central pickup points on street corners. Unlike the Johnny Gosch case, the FBI became involved immediately, and they looked for similarities between the 2 disappearances. Both boys had vanished at about dawn on a Sunday morning just as they went to pick up their newspapers at a corner drop-off point in their residential neighborhoods. They were both seen talking to a man just before they vanished. The 2 drop-offs were located about 8 miles apart. The FBI found no trace of Martin, nor could they establish a link between the 2 disappearances despite some similarities. In July 1985, nearly 3 years after Johnny had disappeared, his parents continued to keep their son's story in the public eye. John and Noreen Gosch held a news conference and offered a $400,000 reward to kidnappers in exchange for his release. They promised not to support criminal charges against his abductors. The Gosches said that they were disappointed with the police investigation and believed that they possessed evidence that their son was kidnapped. Besides providing information about repeated alleged sightings and phone calls, Johnny's parents displayed a dollar bill with the words, "I am alive. Johnny Gosch," written on it in cursive writing. A Sioux City, Iowa, woman said that she had received the money as change when she made a purchase at a supermarket in June. The dollar bill was traced back to the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis, where it was released on July 25, 1984. 3 handwriting experts compared the note to something that Johnny had written before he was kidnapped. They concluded that the writing was his. Appealing to his kidnappers, his parents said, "Contact us privately to negotiate for our son's return alive and unharmed. We will be willing to meet your demands, and we will in turn also discontinue our private investigation. We will in no way attempt to discover your identity, and if the authorities wish to pursue the matter, we will not involve ourselves in any type of legal resolution." These efforts led the family no closer to finding their son, but they did not give up. The Gosches left their son's bedroom just as it was the morning that he disappeared. In 1990, John Gosch received a phone call from lawyer John DeCamp in Omaha, Nebraska, with what appeared to be a fresh lead. The lawyer said that one of his clients who was in jail claimed that he had abducted Johnny Gosch. A skeptical John Gosch hired private investigator Roy Stevens to talk to 24-year-old Paul Bonacci, who was in prison for sexually assaulting 3 boys. When the Gosches later met Bonacci, they came away convinced that he was telling them the truth. He said that a ring of pedophiles forced him into prostitution at the age of 8 and later used him as a decoy in the abduction of other young boys. He told them that he and another man had kidnapped Johnny as part of an organized pedophile ring. One man pushed the boy into the back seat of the Ford Fairmont, and Bonacci used chloroform to make him lose consciousness. Gosch was taken to a house in Sioux City, Iowa, and subsequently sold to a pedophile who lived on a ranch in Colorado. Bonacci last saw Johnny there in 1989 before he was sent to a European country, renamed Mark, and had his hair dyed black. The Gosches were convinced about Bonacci's story because he provided details about their son that were not common knowledge. He told Noreen Gosch that Johnny had a stutter and had once taken yoga. These were details that had not been released to the media. She and her husband brought the information about Bonacci to police hoping that they would interview him and other men that they believed were involved in their son's abduction. However, the West Des Moines police were skeptical about the confession, in part because Bonacci has multiple personalities. Only one personality claims to have been involved in the abduction. He had also been charged with perjury after testifying that well-known Omaha citizens were involved in pedophilia. Police believed that he would therefore make a poor witness if the case were solved and went to trial. In 1992, the Gosch case was featured on the television show America's Most Wanted. The airing generated hundreds of new leads, but all turned into dead ends. Noreen Gosch claimed that her son paid her a visit at her apartment in March 1997 for an hour. She said that he told her he could not come home because he was involved in criminal activities. On August 27, 2006, 2 photos were left on Noreen Gosch's doorstep. One showed a young boy bound and gagged. The other photo was of 3 boys bound and gagged and lying side by side on a bed. She was certain that the images were of her son, but police analysis revealed that this was not the case. Retired Detective Nelson Zalva from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in Tampa, Florida, said that the photos were evidence in a case that he had investigated in the late 1970s, before Johnny Gosch was abducted. All the boys in the photo were identified, and none were Johnny Gosch. The case has not been solved and theories about Johnny Gosch's fate abound. However, the family lobbied successfully for changes in how child abductions are investigated. In 1984, the Iowa State Legislature passed a bill that allowed police to respond quickly when receiving reports of missing children instead of waiting 72 hours. Police in Iowa and many other states start searching for a missing child immediately. The nonprofit National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was set up in 1984 as an information clearinghouse. It works to prevent child abductions and sexual exploitation, helps find missing children, and offers support to victims and their families.